but freedom is something you earn every day, and that strength is something we need to reinforce.
But how do you?
That's how the show was supposed to start this morning. Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. Doing an afternoon show, I'll be doing more of them because YouTube is working twice as hard to suppress me. I have to work twice as hard to keep the material out there. Thank you for your support. And when I come back, I want to talk about my Substack article. We're going to talk about what Pierre Poilievre said yesterday about the estimates and his pledge to come back to the House of Commons. And then we're going to have a look at what happened in question period today. Hope it's going to be entertaining for you. We'll find out.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist.
Yes, please like the station and subscribe. My subscriptions are way down. That's because I'm being suppressed. YouTube is really after the station. You've heard that CBC got a YouTube station canceled. I'm hoping to have the owner of that station, the host of that station, on this show in the near future. We're just discussing in terms of what the parameters of the show will be and whether he needs anonymity and how we're going to do that. But it's a warning. It's a stark warning to all of us doing independent news. And I've done mainstream media for decades. I've worked in the mainstream media. I've worked with the mainstream media as a public affairs officer and a communications person on Parliament Hill. Doesn't matter. You do independent media, you do new media, you're a target. And I think a lot of us are being targets. I'm what you call borderline. This is why my material is always being suppressed, and new subscribers, new people never get to see it. This is why I'm asking you to share it with your friends and family, because YouTube will not share my material. And I just had another show demonetized, and I'm fighting that. Because why? Because they didn't agree with it. And that's what it comes down to. So we have to fight the censorship, and that's what we're here for. Now I want to talk about my Substack column today. The Uniparty is on horizon. You know, I've lost about 3 or 4 subscribers over this. Thank God they were free subscribers. But why? Because I dared to issue a warning to the Conservative Party not to be co-opted by the Liberal Party, by the Liberal government. It's a stark warning, and it needs to be issued. And I don't care. I'm not a party person anymore. I used to belong to the Conservative Party Canada. I don't anymore because I'm trying to be an honest journalist. And I sometimes have to criticize the Conservative Party. I supported Poilievre in his leadership drive. I supported the Conservative Party to win the last election. I thought it was the only alternative to Mark Carney and the Liberals. And I continue to support Pierre Poilievre as the leader of the Conservative Party. Frankly, I don't think there's anybody else who could do the job. And I think he's still got a lot of political life in him. And I believe at his heart, he wants to be a principled conservative. There's a lot of pressure on him by the left-wingers in the party, by the so-called moderates, to move to the center, to move leftward, to abandon conservative principles. And I think right now he's biding his time until he gets that by-election over with. That's going to be a hell of a fight, not because he's in any danger of losing, but because he's going to be smack in the middle of Alberta independence country. And every day he's going to be faced with that as a federalist in the midst of probably a majority Alberta separatist area. So this is going to be a very difficult by-election for Pierre Poilievre. And believe me, I can certainly sympathize. It's not going to be an easy time. However, I think it's going to be a character building exercise for him. I really do believe that. And I think he's going to come out on this stronger. He's going to come out on top. So read the article. This is not an article advocating for a third party. I'm not advocating that the People's Party of Canada is suddenly going to replace the Conservative Party of Canada. I'm not advocating to remove Pierre Poilievre. I'm suggesting there is a danger of being co-opted by the Mark Carney government because the Mark Carney government is deliberately trying to sound like the Pierre Poilievre government would have sounded like had it been elected. That's the point. And they want to subsume all opposition into a one-party state. They want no opposition. And that's the point. The Conservatives have to be very careful. They have to be on guard. They have to be diligent and vigilant. That is my point. Read the column, please. And don't say, oh, the Krayden is anti-CPC. He's anti-Poilievre. I'm an honest journalist who sometimes has to criticize the Conservative Party, and I will do so. I will continue to do so. I will always do so, because if you don't criticize it, it becomes further and further a creation of the left-wing media. That's what has happened to every Conservative Party in the past. It moves to the left because the left-wing media pushes it there. So that's all I want to say about that right now. There is some breaking news. Some lower courts have blocked Donald Trump's tariffs. However, and of course, the Carney government and Poilievre have already said, yes, that's great news. But Trump has already signaled he's going to bring it to the Supreme Court as soon as Friday, like tomorrow. He's going to fight that decision. So it's by no means a done deal that the Trump tariffs are over because the Superior Court in the United States ruled so. He's going to the Supreme Court over this. Now, the Supreme Court might rule against him because they have done so in the past. So it's by no means a done deal for Donald Trump. So this might be good news to end these tariffs for all Canadians. And I have never been supportive of these tariffs. Tariffs are bad news. They've always been bad news. They contributed hugely to the Great Depression in the 1930s. Protectionism was a large part of the Great Depression. I'm a free trader. I always have been. And I'll remain so. I have been so since Ronald Reagan in the 1980s advocated for free trade with Canada. And Canada responded. And that's where I'll always going to be on this issue. Now we have an update. Yes, we do. Yes, I spoke to Katie at the Ostrich farm, and she said she has received absolutely no communication from the agriculture minister. Absolute silence. She said radio silence. There's some talk about the birds being possibly used. They've been in contact with Dr. Oz. The birds might be used for experimental purposes, not as guinea pigs. Don't read that into it. But there's a possibility that the ostriches might be saved by a third party. And that would be very nice, because this is absolute insanity. Killing all of these birds simply because one or two of them might have had avian flu. They have developed herd immunity. This is what herd immunity is all about. This is why they call it herd immunity. It's because when a bunch of animals, as a herd, like 400 of them, get together, they develop immunity together. So I'm hoping for a happy ending to this story, because it's quite sad. It really, really is quite sad. If these birds are killed, it's not just about killing birds either. It's about the government. And I have to tell you this. This is about the government usurping control over private property, and not just stepping onto private property, stepping onto somebody's farmland without being invited or asked to, but then stealing their produce, stealing their property, and then killing it. This is an absolute violation of basic human rights in Canada. It's an absolute violation of what it should be to be Canadian. We don't expect the government to start stealing the produce off farms. That happens in Soviet Russia. communist China, not supposedly democratic free enterprise Canada. So this story has really bothered me from day one. It honestly has. Another big story here is the defense minister tells arms makers to prepare for accelerated federal spending. Where do you think that accelerated federal spending is going to go? To the military industrial establishment, and the arms never stay in Canada. They're going to go to Ukraine if the war is still on, or they're going to go to the European Union because Mark Carney wants to join a European Union defense coalition, which is insanity. We already have NATO. That's bad. And NATO has already passed its due date and should probably be disbanded. And it should not be expanding any further east. But we don't need a European Union military coalition to start a war with Russia. That's insane. And before I forget, I wanted to go back to this. I got a very nice response to this Substack here, and I want to read this to you. This is from Beth, and she says, well, I hazard to guess who's hauled Poilievre aside and read him their version of a riot act, or do as I say, not as I do act. Fact is, Canada's being systematically dismantled by people who are as evil as it gets. And yet we're all standing by watching our own demise. It's like looking through a construction site fence peephole. In a 2015 PBS interview with Charlie Rose, Klaus Schwab, the executive director of the World Economic Forum, emphatically stated with a wry smirk on his face that the vaccines would change people from the inside. To which Rose stated, aren't you messing with genetics here? And that would pose an ethics problem. Schwab responded, there would be, quote, ways of getting around that, end quote. So what's my point in sharing this, Beth asks? Maybe, just maybe, there's something in that jab juice that's numbed and dumbed people down so they're going to be compliant and not resist those in charge of this evilness being thrust upon the world at large. Let's think about that. But of course, we know the vaccine is safe and effective. So I want to go to this really wonderful news conference with Pierre Poilievre from yesterday. Now, people are saying I'm being too hard on Pierre right now. I think he's quite heroic in this interview. And no, I'm not trying to suck up to the Conservative Party supporters who think you have to be 100% behind Poilievre in the party at all times, every day of the week, 24 hours a day. I honestly think he does quite well in this news conference, and I wanted to share this with you.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm very pleased to be joined by my Shadow Minister of Finance, Jas Halan. We also have our Associate Finance Shadow Minister here, Eric Lefebvre. Yesterday, the government tabled a Ways and Means motion with regards to 3 tax measures. Now, I'll just take a very brief trip down memory lane, not to go too far back, but of course, we Conservatives have been leading a crusade for lower taxes, to axe the carbon tax and the GST off new homes, to cut income taxes. And of course, when we proposed this, the Liberals said we were crazy, and now Ways and Means motion, GST off homes, very brief trip down memory lane, and watered down versions of them. They're most taxes. And of course, when we proposed this, the Liberals said we were crazy, and now all of a sudden they are, at least in part, plagiarizing our policy proposal.
They are plagiarizing our policy proposals. That's precisely what's going on. They are copying at least the words, if not the intent, of everything Pierre Poilievre said during the election campaign. But I have to make this observation too. Have you ever seen Pierre Poilievre quite so chipper, quite so happy, even though he doesn't have a seat in the House of Commons? This is clearly a strategy going on here from the backroom people saying you've got to look positive all the time. You've got to appear like you're always just too happy about things.
and adopting modified and watered-down versions of them. Their motion will partly eliminate the carbon tax, the GST off homes, and give a very modest, very tiny income tax cut, so tiny that it would be barely enough to buy you a cup of coffee every week at a Starbucks.
That's an excellent analogy, because Mark Carney's tax cut is very, very small. And it's nothing compared to what Poilievre was offering during the election. But it's clearly there just for window dressing. This is what Carney does. He steals Poilievre's policies and puts them in the window while he's in the back room doing globalist policies, such as agreeing to the WHO pandemic treaty we talked about this morning. Very, very dangerous.
But it's better than nothing. Conservatives came here to fight for lower taxes and more purchasing power. And so we are going to put forward amendments to this motion that will get rid of the entire carbon tax for everyone, for real, for good. We also push for the GST to come off of more homes so that we can encourage more building and more buying. And we'll push for a bigger income tax cut that people will actually notice, so that hard work really does pay off for a change. Finally, we are going to push for cuts in bureaucracy, consultants, corporate welfare, and foreign aid, so that we can match the lost revenue with lower spending in order to avoid adding to the deficit. Every dollar of deficit spending is a dollar of inflation that ultimately shows up across the country. We cannot print and borrow our way to prosperity. We need sound money again, and that means bringing down the deficit.
All right, so you see the strategy here. It's quite obvious. Pierre Poilievre is saying that they're going to support any liberal policy that advances a conservative agenda in any way, if it's better than the status quo, and they hope to add on to it with a little more of their own policy. Now, that might work to a point. However, it's also a great way to keep this government in power. And what about those things that they don't want to support? What about the globalist agenda? What if Mark Carney starts to talk about no more pipelines, net zero policies, a home equity tax? Yeah, they'll oppose it. But Carney will be pretty solidified by that point, and he can continue with his agenda.
So we will, that said, we are the party of taxpayers. We will vote for every tax cut, always and everywhere. We love taxpayers, and we want taxpayers to be better off. We will offer even better ideas in the future. And as I said a few weeks ago, I'm encouraging the Liberals to steal my ideas, because we have the best ideas. We've been winning the debate on ideas, whether it's on carbon taxes, inflation, housing, resources, drugs, crime. Conservatives have been leading on all of those things, and we're here for the right reasons, not for our egos. It's to get things done to make people's lives better so that they can work hard, have beautiful homes in safe neighborhoods. That's our mission, and that's what we'll fight for.
Can I ask you about main estimates? Main estimates were also tabled yesterday, a $486 billion spending.
All right, we'll go back to that in a second. Here is what they are talking about. The main estimates. Tell me I didn't put it up. Anyway, well, I'll see if I can find that slide for you. But the main estimates are essentially really lowballing, and I'll see if I can find that slide for you. I had it up here.
Plan. We don't know how the money's going to get raised for that. I wonder if you've had a chance to review the estimates and whether or not you should vote on those before you see a budget and a fiscal framework.
That's a very good question. Just like Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney's spending is absolutely out of control. In fact, it's worse. Mr. Carney has proposed $130 billion of additional spending above and beyond what Mr. Trudeau had already baked into the prior budget. This is extremely irresponsible. Inflation continues to rise, and we want Mr. Carney to introduce a budget this spring so that we know the size of the deficit, how much it will add to inflation, how he's going to reverse the hemorrhaging of job losses in our country. And we're calling on Mr. Carney, who claims that he's a man with a plan, to show us the plan in one budget document.
Here's
Measures. Now,
what
I'll
I'm
just take a very brief trip down memory.
I believe I'm doing this. Where
going to reverse the hemorrhaging of job losses in our country. And we're calling on Mr. Carney, who claims that he's a man with a plan, to show us the plan in one budget document.
All right, here's the story. Carney government tables $486 billion spending plan with few details. This is what you find is called the estimates, which nobody ever reads, and unfortunately, a lot of the media never read. But they are right now because there's no budget. So this is the money that Carney is spending without a budget, and it's at least as much as Justin Trudeau is spending, probably a lot more. So Carney talks a good game about wanting to cut government spending, wanting to cut the bureaucracy, but in reality, he's on a whole different page. Now let's get back to this.
My caucus will be reviewing the estimates, David, and when we have a chance to do our homework, we'll decide. We don't want to decide on $500 billion of spending without having done a little bit of homework. So we'll have the pencils and the calculators out, and we will come back to you with a direct answer to that question.
I've never seen Pierre Poilievre so happy talking to the media. It's even on a first name basis now. I know there's some communication ploy going on here. I know he's been told to be a lot more friendlier, to be nice to the mainstream media, talk to them like they're human beings, don't dismiss them, don't be too arrogant, call them by their first name, answer all their questions, and keep smiling. Except after a while, you know he's going to break. But however, this is the plan for the moment, and expect to see this every day.
En deuil, M. Poilievre, de ne pas être à la période de questions aujourd'hui.
I don't like it.
Vous n'êtes pas à la période des questions, parce que vous êtes un peu en deuil.
How does it feel not being able to be
En français, peut-être?
Yesterday, the government tabled the ways and already baked in. Who claims that he's a man with a plan. My caucus will be. So we'll have the pencils and the calculators out, and we will come back to you with a direct answer to that question.
3
En
times.
deuil, M. Poilievre, de ne pas être à la période de questions aujourd'hui.
I don't like it.
Vous n'êtes pas à la période des questions, parce que vous êtes un peu en deuil.
How does it feel not being able to be
En français,
C'est la même question. I'll respond in both languages. Hey, I'd love to be in there. It's a great place. I love the House of Commons. I love the excitement and the thrill. And I've never really been a spectator of the House. So but I'm going to work hard to earn the opportunity to do it again. I consider it a great privilege that I've been able to do it for so long in the past. And I think the opposition has a great role to hold the most powerful people in the country accountable through question period. En français?
Yeah, well, I thought he handled that pretty well. Although, once again, this is not the Pierre Poilievre we all know. And I would say largely loved. He's just a little too positive about the circumstances he's in right now, which is having to do these news conferences in the foyer and not being able to sit in the House of Commons. He's clearly not happy about that, but he's doing his best. Excuse me, still suffering from this cough. Still, he's doing his best to suggest there are better days coming. And I think there will be for him. Here's question
Mr.
period.
Speaker, this Prime Minister said that he would be guided by a new fiscal discipline. He
Not the
said
whole
that he
question
would limit operational expenditures to no greater than an increase of 2%. Yet he's presented a bill of $500 billion to Canadians. Single mothers, seniors, small businesses all make a budget before they spend. You would think that a highly esteemed banker would know that and would do that. So is he really committed to a new fiscal discipline? Or is he just like the last guy?
L'honorable ministre des Finances et du Revenu National.
Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure.
Okay, so we learned right away. Remember Philippe Champagne? Oh no, he's back. He's going to be up a lot more as finance minister with that whiny voice of his. But where's Mark Carney? He was barely there for 5 questions yesterday. He fled the House. He was there, 2 days this week? Is this going to be the pattern? He won't be there Friday. None of the front bench MPs are there Friday. So is he going to be a 2-day-a-week prime minister? Well, it's like I said. He's going to issue public proclamations once or twice a week. And the rest of the time, he's back. He's in the back room doing the work he wants to do, which is globalism, which is in the pocket of China, which is devaluing the US dollar, devaluing the Canadian dollar, planning. He'll be in the back room.
House, and it's a pleasure to deliver for Canadian, Mr. Speaker. We are delivering on our plans to make life more affordable in Canada, Mr. Speaker. The first measure we introduced was a tax cut for 22 million Canadians. There are Canadians in our riding that are going to benefit from the tax cut. We're eliminating GST on first-time home buyers for their new house, Mr. Speaker, and we are removing the consumer carbon price from law, Mr. Speaker. Together, we're going to build Canada strong, and I hope the Conservative will join us in that.
The honourable member for Calgary, Midnapore.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Liberals never learn and they never keep their promises. The Treasury Board President said in the last Parliament that she would find savings of $7.1 billion on high-paid consultants. Instead, this government is now spending another $6 billion on high-paid consultants. The Prime Minister said that he would limit increases in operational spending of no greater than 2%. Yet he's presented a $500 billion bill to Canadians. So who is the Prime Minister going to choose, Canadians or his friends? Right. Yeah.
Well, clearly it's going to be his friends. This is what Mark Carney has done his whole career, is feed his friends from the positions he's been in. But so this is, by the way, this is today's question period, the opening questions. I'm not ever going to do a live question period every day again. It was just not worth it. But I think it's worth replaying the first couple of questions, the first 3 or 4 questions.
L'honorable ministre des Finances et du Revenu National.
Mr. Speaker, it is very clear we have already chosen Canadians, and Canadians have chosen us, Mr. Speaker, to lead this nation, to build a more ambitious Canada, to build a strong Canada, to build the best economy in the G7. Together on this side of the House, we're going to build the Canada of the future, Mr. Speaker.
Full member for Calgary, Midnapore.
Monsieur le Président, le Premier ministre.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said that he would be guided by a new level of fiscal discipline. He promised to limit spending, and yet now he has brought in legislation that would include expenses of billions of dollars in additional spending despite the complete lack of budget. Even small businesses make a budget before moving forward. Why would a banker not do the same thing? Will he finally show a certain level of fiscal discipline, or is he going to be just like the Prime Minister before him? The Honourable Minister of Finance and National Revenue. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. As she has seen, we are presenting an ambitious plan for Canadians. And the very first measure we brought in was a middle-class tax cut that will affect 22 million people in her riding who will benefit. Then we said that we would be eliminating the GST for first buyers of new builds. That will enable us to have a resilient economy, a strong economy, the strongest one in the G7.
Simcoe North. $1 trillion. Nothing says spend less and invest more like spending more money on high-priced consultants and contractors. That's going up to $26 billion a year, over 35% increase. Wow. Is the kind of change this government trying to deliver to push civil servants out to bring their friends and high-priced consultants like McKinsey back in?
Oh, good question.
Good question.
L'honorable ministre des Finances et du Revenu National.
I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we're focusing on result. And you know what? The first measure that we have introduced in this Parliament is to help 22 million Canadians, Mr. Speaker. People in every riding. Canadians are watching at home and are wondering, are the Conservatives going to support them? Are they going to support this government? Because Canadians know that we have their back and we're going to fight for them at every step of.
Okay, it's enough of Francois Philippe Champagne as he whines on ad nauseum. But hey, question period hasn't changed. You still ask questions and get no answers, or you get the same answer with the same talking points over and over and over again. So nothing's going to change. I'm interested to see how much we see of Mark Carney in the House of Commons, or if it's all going to be backroom deals. I think it is. Anyway, thank you for watching the second episode of Stand on Guard today. This has been live from the nation's capital in Ottawa. I'll be doing more of these as I fight YouTube suppression on this channel. Thank you for your support. Share this station, share this show with your friends and family, because I tell you, we're under attack. And a lot of other folks are, but I am really under attack right now from the YouTube censors. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being a part of this experience. God bless this country. Godspeed to all of you. I'll be back.